Today, we're going to dive into the incredible and frankly almost unbelievable story of a forgotten genius. We're talking about a young black girl whose mind in the 19th century was so brilliant, so profound, it actually threatened the entire structure of scientific prejudice. And because of that, people in power tried to wipe her from the pages of history. So this question right here is really at the heart of her story. I mean, what if the very people who could have completely changed the world were just systematically silenced, their work stolen, or just buried forever? Lydia Johnson's life makes you realize that it's not just a what if, it's a very real and tragic possibility. These are the first words we really have from her. And they're not from some seasoned professor, right? They're from Lydia Johnson, a 13-year-old girl. She was found at 2 o'clock in the morning inside a laboratory at MIT back in 1897. And get this, she wasn't causing trouble. She was correcting an advanced mathematical proof that had totally stumped the university's best and brightest grad students. So how did this all even start? Our story really kicks off with a letter. Emil Foreman writes to Professor Harrison Webb at MIT, and is describing something impossible. He says he found the cleaning woman's daughter, this young black girl, just effortlessly solving these incredibly complex equations, the kind of stuff the top minds at the institute were wrestling with. Honestly, the claim was so wild that it was almost dismissed as a complete prank. And this gets to the absolute core of what made Lydia's mind so unique. She didn't just learn math, it was like she saw it. The sources we have say she experienced numbers as a kind of architecture. She could intuitively feel how all the pieces fit together. I mean, she could literally teach herself advanced physics just by watching the wind blow through the city, because she could visualize the equations behind it all. It's just incredible. So when Professor Webb actually goes to find her, the difference between their worlds is just jarring. He leaves the hallowed halls of MIT and finds himself in this cramped, cold room in a boarding house. Here's this girl living in absolute poverty, but inside her head is this entire universe of mathematical beauty. Her mother, Clara, was, terrified. She just assumed her daughter was in trouble for being too smart. Webb knew right away he'd found a once-in-a-generation mind, but the board at MIT saw a problem, a threat to the whole social order. So they agreed to a formal examination, but let's be clear, this was a trap. The man they put in charge, Dr. Marcus Thorne, was a racial theorist. His entire career was built on proving the intellectual inferiority of black people. So his goal wasn't to test her, it was to prove she was a fraud. This really lays out the conflict perfectly, doesn't it? You have the panel, whose entire goal is to find a trick, to protect their prejudiced worldview. And then you have Lydia, who just wants to solve the problem and explain the truth. They were operating in two completely different realities. One was all about power, and the other was about pure, simple objective math. And this is the moment. After hours of them just hammering her with hostile questions, Lydia hits them with this absolute bombshell. She calmly tells this panel of powerful, educated white men that truth doesn't really care about their social theories. It exists whether it's convenient for them or not. She wasn't just solving their math problems, she was taking apart their entire worldview with pure logic. So, Thorne couldn't prove she was a fraud. So what does he do? He decides to imprison her genius instead. He uses all of his influence to have Lydia declared a ward of the state, and then he has her abducted. She's taken to a place called the Brightwater Institute, not for help, but for study. And that's just a chilling way of saying something much, much worse was waiting for her. They were just nightmarish. We know from a secret letter smuggled out by a nurse that she was kept in total isolation. Thorne's real goal was to cause mental breakdown so he could prove her genius was just a form of instability. The cruelty here is just off the charts. It got so bad that she overheard them talking about dissecting her brain for research, as if she wasn't even a person anymore. Professor Webb realized the system wasn't going to save her, so he decided he had to break it. He hires an investigator, and with the help of a nurse on the inside, they plan this incredibly daring rescue. I mean, it reads like a thriller. It's this high-stakes, minute-by-minute race against time to save a child from the very men who are supposed to be the gatekeepers of science and reason. So they make it. They escape to Canada. But that freedom, it came with a huge cost. Lydia Johnson had to vanish. She took on a new name, Sarah Miller, and her survival now depended on being completely anonymous. And this created a whole new heartbreaking problem. How does a mind like that give its gifts to the world if its owner can't even exist? And this was the gut-wrenching deal they made. Lydia would continue her revolutionary work in secret, and Harrison Webb would publish it under his own name. It was the only way they could think of to get her ideas out into the world while keeping her safe. Her genius would get to live, but her identity had to be erased. And for 15 years, that's how it worked. Papers that would go on to become foundational in their fields were published with Webb's name on them. The world was celebrating him as this incredible innovator, with no idea that the real genius behind it, the person who was revolutionizing how we design bridges and buildings, was a young, black woman working in secret from a small apartment in Toronto. This brings us to the final, and maybe the most haunting, part of Lydia's story. You know, after all those years of being invisible, you'd think her enemies would be satisfied. But they weren't. They wanted to rewrite her history for good, to make sure that if she was remembered at all, it was as a fraud, not a genius. Thorne went and published a book that became the official scientific record of what happened. And in it, he painted Lydia's case as a cautionary tale. You know, an unstable girl, a savant, maybe, but not a true intellect. And because Lydia couldn't come out of hiding to defend herself, his lie became history. He cemented her erasure. And the end of her life is just profoundly tragic. After Professor Webb died, Lydia lived for another 44 years. Look at that slice. 44 years in total isolation. She never stopped working. She filled notebook after notebook with research that was decades ahead of its time. But she did it all in silence. Her brilliance was trapped, unseen by anyone until long after she was gone. 17. Let that number just sink in for a second. 17 groundbreaking papers that pushed science and engineering forward in huge ways. 17 moments of pure discovery that were all credited to someone else. That one number tells you everything about the massive scale of her contribution and the profound injustice of her story. And that brings us right back to where we started. Lydia's story was almost lost completely. It only survived because of one box of documents and a curious student who found it a century later. And it forces us to ask this really unsettling question. How many others weren't so lucky? How many other Lydia Johnsons has history just erased?